Okay. I think we're live.
We think.
Are we?
Maybe. We don't know.
Oh, and now Chris pops in.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness,
Now he
right
drops
on the
in.
wire.
Perfect timing. I mean,
Right
like that.
when we go live.
He was like sitting there waiting. Okay, when is it going to happen? Now.
Not everybody all at once now. What happened?
No, we
Well, we're
literally
live, buddy.
just went live and you showed up.
Oh, nice. Nice. Look
Yes.
at that.
And I just I renamed you. So, all right, guys. I think we're live right now. I don't know. None of us know.
Confirmed.
We haven't done this.
We are.
Confirmed.
It's
We
We
confirmed.
are
have
confirmed
information.
live. Okay. One of us has to watch that. But Brent, and I'm
Rachel,
you watch
Rachel
that.
in the chat confirmed we're live. Thank
Okay,
you,
cool.
Rachel.
Yay.
So, guys, we're live. We don't do this normally. We're podcasters, but we're gonna toy around a little bit with YouTube so that we could do these things where we just like suddenly get together and just maybe talk about whatever. And you know, this is gonna be it's gonna be kind of loose today. We're gonna probably go no more than an hour. But I just figured we want to get some of us
Stop
together.
it, Brent. Behave.
We'll see.
We just want to talk about specifically the Ray Fisher stuff because I mean I think we all kind of touched on our shows, but there's just so much to really talk about, and really the best way to do it is just kind of get all of us together. So, and I think delay wise, have you guys figured out what our delay is?
No.
Okay.
No.
So I think the delay is somewhere between 10 to 15 seconds. So like when you send a comment, we're already like 15 seconds in the future at that point in time. So, so we're gonna, we'll kind of keep a little bit of an eye on the comments, but.
Sorry, totally just got Spaceballs in my head. When will then be now? Soon. How soon?
I don't know what he's
What
talking
am I
about.
looking at?
I'm with you, Ray. Don't worry.
Thank you.
So, so we're gonna kind of talk about some of the Ray Fisher stuff, and then at the end, we're gonna kind of see what some of you guys have to say. So just kind of hang tight. But like I said, we're probably not gonna pay as much attention to the comments. We're gonna try to stay focused on this, but we'll get to you guys a little bit later. Sound good, guys? 5 years before we get started with the Ray Fisher stuff. 5 years tomorrow, Scott.
Tomorrow.
Oh my God. Hey, at least I wasn't the only one.
I know,
There's the
I
lips
know.
and publish date, and then there's the apocryphal when it actually like went live on iTunes, now Apple Podcasts
Yeah.
or whatever. We've
Yeah, I
gone
had
through a
that-
name change already.
Yes, only one name change though, so that's not bad for 5 years. We've only rebranded ourselves one time.
And then
But
we
yeah,
got all these like hangers on.
Yeah,
like
little
they all
hangers
like
on.
showed up at some point.
you got to start a family at some point, right?
Jeez.
So,
God, do we really have to take this marriage metaphor any further than it already has?
yeah.
Oh, I don't know that we've taken it far enough. I don't know that we've taken it far enough. I mean, we got to cat in the hat territory the other night. Thing 1, 2, 3,
Yep.
4. Right?
There's 5. We
Five.
officially
Five
know
is
that Chris
here.
is 5.
Yes,
I was
the
listening. So I was listening back to our show as editing it, and I just had to laugh, Brent, because we were talking about like number 1, number 2, and Brent comes in, he goes, "Yeah, Scott's a good solid number 2."
Oh, like you didn't figure that out. Like, were you not like? I
No.
was there.
No,
knew
I
what
was there too, but like you kind of forget about it, and then you go as I was going back to produce it, I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's a solid comment." No pun intended.
Ah.
Well, you're talking about Brent, who we used to refer to as like my permanent sub. I mean, let's be honest. That's how you came in.
It's
Brent.
how it started. It is how it
Yeah.
started. I was definitely the filling guy. You see, what happened was I was sitting getting my car worked on when Tim texted me or DM'd me or whatever, asking me about it. And at the time, it was because, Scott, you were getting close to having another baby.
Mhm.
And what I didn't say was, I'm having one in that time frame too. It's like, I'll figure it out. I'll make it work.
And little do we know, like through time, that really didn't matter when it came to Scott. Like he'll have a baby and be on the air with it. So
Yeah.
I'll bring the baby with
he'll
me.
bule baby with, right? So it doesn't really matter. That was
That's
good
awesome.
times. By the way, so we were trying to get Jordan on here as well, but our rule number 1 with this thing when we do these things is family first. So if like we've got family related things that are coming up, that takes number 1 priority over this.
Mhm.
Family before entertainment, right?
Oh man, can you
I
remember
don't
those
think that's
phone-
quite it, but we'll go with it.
Yeah.
Hey, Tim and I have had many a phone conversation about I want to stay married.
That's
we're going to change a record date. We're gonna do something because one of us was in hot water at any given time with our wives.
That is a form of accountability.
It is.
So,
Yeah.
There we go.
You know, I never get in the hot water with the starting time. It's always you guys have been on there for 3.5 hours. What are you doing?
Well, that's because of this guy.
Oh,
That's because of Ray.
it's not just him. Let's be clear. I can extend it myself.
I am not the most long-winded. Okay, maybe I'm the most long-winded, but I'm not
You
the
are.
only long-winded person on this network.
Oh, me and Jordan, or Jordan and I, rather. Sorry, Scott. We
Oh,
can
boy.
spin a yarn. It's
You
Yeah.
guys drop some
We
marathon
can go.
episodes.
yeah, it's kind of like all we do lately. We're just like, what's the lowest quality I can release this under, and it still sounds okay. We got to make that file size small.
I mean, it's not weird science length, which is
Yeah. Theirs
don't
have
know
been
how those
shorter,
guys
but
do
they have different segments and stuff like that. Ours is lacking in that, but I wouldn't say lacking. I think we're fine with the segments we have.
Oh man.
So-
So I mean, I had thought, getting ready for this weekend that I felt like the whole Ray Fisher situation kind of, I
Mhm.
floated the idea to Tim that we really kind of needed to dedicate an episode to it. Because in my opinion, just when you watch the timeline, when you watch comments, when you're following, because you got to remember how long, I mean, we're talking since like the end of June, this has really been kicking into high gear.
Yeah.
And it always reminds me when I look at the timeline, how there's a core group of people who follow these situations and follow every twist, every turn, every detail, every comment. And then there's the normal people who I see comments about how it's like, well, I haven't heard any specifics, or I haven't heard this. And I'm like, do I need to DM you? I have specifics. I can cut and paste some tweets for you if you want to see something here. And so I felt like this was a good time for all of us to kind of get together, our collective memory, our collective brain power, our collective opinions, and just kind of lay out the situation as we see it. And I want to preface it by saying as we see it, because we understand people are going to disagree with us, but we're going to say this is where we're coming from based on the information that has been presented and also based on information that we are privy to.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this really started, our first hit of this entire thing was June 29th. And that's where Ray tweeted out that little clip of him basically saying, Joss was a great person or great selection for Zach to bring in to kind of finish up the film. So this was, in the promotion of Justice
It was
League.
Comic-Con 2017.
Yeah.
I remember.
And he said, I'd like to take a moment to forcefully retract every bit of this statement. And he put that little video clip. So that was like the first clue. And then it was the very next day we got our first bit of details on this thing.
Right, which is
2 days later, I think.
No, I really do think it was
July 1st.
July 1st. Okay. Yeah. It just seemed like it was just like bam, bam, like one right after the other. Because that's when we got the gross, abusive, unprofessional tweet about Joss Whedon. But then separated by a line break was the enabled by Jeff Johns and John Berg.
Yeah. So that was just shocking at the time. Because you normally don't see
shocking
get
that
to this point.
Shocking that he said it. Any one of us at that point already had in our minds where we were at with respect to Jeff Johns and John Berg. So for a lot of, I saw this reaction, for a lot of people, it was validation and like confirmation, like, hey, this is what we thought. Now we know some stuff happened. So, and yeah.
And you got to remember, this was like a week or two after David Ayer had made the very first public statement about John's making changes to the movies. And Ray Fisher said something to the extent of like, I feel you, I understand. Or he replied to
the timeline comment. The one where he said John's broke his time, and it was the Harley thing, right? Harley being an accomplice to the murder of Robin.
Right. Yeah. It was that one.
So that was like our first, like, huh? Like someone actually, the name was brought up. by not a fan, but by
an actual creative
an
involved.
actual creative.
Yeah.
So then when this happened with the Joss Whedon comment, which we all kind of like, hearing the stuff about Joss Whedon didn't really shock anybody.
No.
Not really.
No, it's not, especially when you consider the history, the stuff with his wife, the stuff with Charisma Carpenter.
Yeah.
That was one of the things when this comment first came up. It's like, I mean, technically all we have is what Ray is saying, but what he's saying checks out when you compare it to the established history of Joss Whedon. And so, well, no, we don't technically have proof. What we do have is a history. And so, if nothing else, it's a pattern. Thank you. If nothing else, it's not like this was out of the blue to us.
It's like one of those things when somebody makes a statement about somebody like, hey, so-and-so said this, there's no recording. It's just, it's passed on word of mouth from one person to another. It's one of those things where you hear it, you're like, you know what, that actually checks out, because that kind of agrees with things that we have heard and other things that have been said in the past. And this was just one of those examples right now.
I think the point is that what can happen from this point forward is what people who are there are some people who are skeptical or being even-handed about the situation. Mm-hmm. And I still think that there are people who are doing that out of a legit concern of fear of bandwagoning and that kind of thing. And then to the people who are just being willfully stubborn at some point. And I personally make a delineation between the two. I don't know how anyone else feels.
I think you have to, because it's difficult, especially on social media, because people tend to use the same rhetoric, and you never know what someone will say that will offend you or will offend somebody else. Somebody could believe that they're being as even-keeled and fair about it as possible, but they will word it in a way that you will take offense to how they're coming at what you're saying. And then somebody else could believe that you're completely full of it and you have no idea what you're talking about and not word it that way.
Yeah.
Like it's just tough to, it's kind of on an individual basis. But yeah, there are definitely people who are legitimately trying to avoid the cancel culture aspect of this. Mm-hmm. But then there are people that just legitimately have their head in the sand and don't want to know and don't care to see any implications of what this could possibly mean.
And I get it of wanting to avoid cancel culture to an extent, because there are people that, get canceled and then people kind of wish you could backtrack it, or maybe they think longer about it, or they look at it different, or more evidence. I mean, you hate to convict someone in the court of public opinion too rashly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that happens all the time. And so I understand the people who say, I'm going to step back and I'm just going to listen and I'm going to hear what people are saying. I'm going to give both sides their opportunity to speak from their perspective. And technically, and I know people don't like this, Whedon, Berg, Johns, they have a right to defend themselves. Mm-hmm. Now, we've only to date really seen Berg try to step out and actually do that at all, even with any comments. But of course, he was so dismissive of the actual concerns that he didn't officially waive his rights, but it really kind of felt like it.
No, he basically painted a target and said, yeah, come at me now.
Yeah. Well, the problem with Berg's comments was it was so ridiculous to suggest that Ray Fisher, whatever affected him on his time in a set in 2017, that it was all about the fact that he was basically pushed to say booyah, which was just ridiculous. That was the utter ridiculousness of John Berg's tweet. Like, that's why Ray Fisher would be doing this, coming out publicly, knowing the impact that this potentially has on his career. That's the part that was like so insulting to me.
Yeah. Because Ray Fisher was not childish in his, in my opinion. I don't think he was childish about the way he went about it. Like, he didn't come out screaming and yelling. He's just saying, and like he eased into it. And like you said, set up different things, but he didn't come out like pointing all these fingers. It was a slow process of making these things. And then he did start saying names. And for the first comment, which could have been in defense or explain it in some way that makes sense, it is this insanely childish response. And that's like, oh, okay, there is fire. Like, not that we didn't think so before, but this was just another brimstone thrown into it, you know? Like, it was pretty crazy that was the professional response from this producer. It was a little bit mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like, he has every right to defend himself. The way he did defend himself, I thought was kind of ridiculous.
Right. I don't even know that I would call it a defense. Honestly, it really was a dismissal.
Yeah,
because
I would agree.
A defense has a better is better prepared. An actual defense, even if it's a wrong defense, a wrong defense is better prepared than that. It's more than just, oh, well, he didn't want to say booyah. It's something else. It's something that, I would have expected an actual defense from John Berg would have been like, I don't know what he's talking about. Everyone got along on set. We had no issues. Whether it's a lie or not, it would have been more than just he didn't want to say booyah.
And then I think what also there was a lot happening like in that 1 to 2 week period there in July, because on Fat Man Beyond, then you had Kevin Smith.
Yeah.
Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin spent a chunk of their show discussing Ray Fisher's accusation.
Word by word. Yeah.
Broke it down word by word. And then Kevin Smith did something that he didn't have to do, which was, when I went to go visit Rise of Skywalker, guys working on Rise of Skywalker worked on both the original production and the reshoots of Justice League. And they told me Joss Whedon was kind of on set talking smack. So Kevin Smith is like soft supporting what Ray's saying just by saying, yeah, I've heard that the culture on set of the reshoots were not the most healthy thing.
Right.
And he didn't have to do that, but he felt compelled to share. And I found that telling.
Yeah.
He felt compelled to share. And I think that at that point, we already were aware, or at least had our suspicions or had heard things here and there about the unhealthy nature of the reshoots in general. Aside from any accusations, we already had suspicions that it was what burned Ben Affleck out, essentially. And that, that just the process itself with the idea of knowing how much of the movie was reshot, like just having that knowledge is like, okay, well, no, this was clearly and then of course, the hindsight is 2020. Everybody looks at the theatrical version of the film and like, okay, well, you can look at his eyes. He's checked out, or like, look at how
the
tired they are.
Match up. They were in the room at the same time. They're they're cut together to look like they're in the same room. All that.
Oh yeah, and it's even worse now that we have like reference shots from the new trailer.
Now that we've seen DC fandom to compare it, be like, it's a DC fandom shot.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So it's all of that just kind of kept bubbling to a head.
Now, I think one thing that I don't feel like too many people were getting on Ray's case when he was bringing up Whedon, because Brent, like you said, pattern behavior. Pretty much everyone just kind of went, oh, okay. Like that that wasn't a tough pill to swallow for some people. It seemed to be when the sites got very tightly focused on Jeff Johns. That was when the pushback really started.
Right.
Now, before we get into what was said, I would like to throw out some speculation at this point about the way Ray Fisher has gone about this over the course of the several months. I felt like in his way of building his case in public, for what's going on, I felt it was important for him to establish Joss Whedon's behavior on set, because his real concern is how executives and the studio, one, brought this individual in, and then two, allowed that behavior to perpetuate,
right?
And then three, as we've now come to see in these later accusations, then dismissed the complaints that employees had about the situation going on. And so I feel like that if you want to look at, if you accept, in my opinion, you can accept Ray Fisher. It has been a very thoughtful, methodical, step-by-step process. All this, it's still going on.
Mm-hmm.
He started all the fire on Joss Whedon because you had to establish that
mm-hmm.
to then follow the breadcrumbs to who is to be ultimately held responsible for that behavior happening and that behavior not being addressed.
Yeah, I mean, it's the accountability aspect of it, right? I mean, because like, and I know on our show, Scott, we've said this a lot of times. I mean, when it comes to all the stuff that went wrong with Justice League, the theatrical release, and there's a ton that just went wrong in it. For me personally, like I've never had the biggest issue with Joss Whedon per se. You know, I don't think he's a great filmmaker. You know, he's not a good replacement for what Zach was doing by any means. And I think his some of his character choices and some of the things that he thinks is funny, I don't think are funny at all. So like from that standpoint, like I've always had issues with him, you know, from that. But really, it all goes back to like who brought him in, and that's really where the issues were. You know, I mean, to me, Joss Whedon was just doing what Joss Whedon does, right? You know, he was brought in to kind of be Joss Whedon, and that's what he did.
Sure,
So,
which was doomed from the beginning because it's so radically different from Snyder.
Exactly.
It was
right.
Joss Whedon could have been a perfect angel on set. He could have been as nice as can be. He could be Ray Fisher's best friend in the world right now. And the movie was still going to be doomed because just the two styles were too opposed to each other. They like one or dislike one or whatever. You could love both styles. You could love work from both directors, and they still weren't going to mesh together.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's the thing that, you know, I think what you were kind of getting at, Scott, like, so that was the issue that Ray had. Like, things happened. There were things that were unprofessional. He went through the proper channels to try to get it addressed. And when he went directly, apparently, to John Berg, to Jeff Johns, you know, to try to get these things that were happening addressed, like that's where he got pushed back. And then some of the stuff that has been alleged about like implied threats to his career and all that, that's where I think it gets really ugly here. And so like when Ray first came out with all this, you know, the little bits of information, you know, because he couldn't reveal too much, but when he first told us that, you know, he made it sound like his issues were with Joss Whedon being enabled by these other guys. It seems to me like now, as we get to some of the most recent activity, it seems like a lot of that is kind of turning more towards Jeff Johns' side of things. Because it seemed like to me, it was like, as you said, Scott, it was like building a case. These were the issues. I tried to get them addressed through proper channels. They weren't getting addressed. And then some stuff, you know, happened that, you know, that is going to be dealt with kind of behind the scenes here. If there were any particular like threats to his career and that kind of thing. So it's like, I see the focus much more on the executive side of things.
Well, you know, all those movies and stories with gangs or cartels where they let the little guys, they let the drug runners go so they can get to the big people in charge. That's almost kind of what it's like. It's like he started off with Whedon, but Whedon was never the end game. I mean, Whedon was the point of the wedge, and he was expanding and expanding so he could go after the bigger fish. I think he's now in bigger fish territory.
Yeah.
Well, and I think their actions dictated that, because I think essentially Fisher's ultimate goal is the institutionalized nature of what is happening. Mm-hmm. He wants to get at what the studio culture, that's why it's all about accountability greater than entertainment, because it's a broader scope. And this is also why I think Kevin Smith said, part of why he said anything, because he knows that this happens in Hollywood. He knows that this is prevalent in that culture. And so I think that by nature of Warner Brothers' actions since this all started, they have kind of indirectly and maybe inadvertently shifted the attention to Johns. He may not have necessarily been going after Johns from the get-go. He is now, because they have made it clear that he's the target. They painted the target on him, and he goes, oh, all right, bullseye, in my opinion, based on what they've done.
But what I would say is this, because when people say, well, what has Fisher alleged? Because one of the criticisms I see from people who are being even-handed or stubborn is that he's talked in generalizations and he's never made any actual accusations. Well, what I always think of when I think about it is this tweet from August 12th. August 12th was when Ray Fisher tweeted out, during the LA reshoots of Justice League, Jeff Johns summoned me to his office to belittle and admonish my and my agent's attempts to take grievances of the proper chain of command. He then made a thinly veiled threat to my career. This behavior cannot continue, A greater than E. So what this tweet said, and he's gone back, and you got to read it, is go, okay, so it wasn't like crap was going down on set with Joss Whedon, and then he went straight to Berg and Johns. That's not the thing. He went to HR. He even said that, I think, in a tweet today or yesterday. He went to HR. He filed a complaint through the proper channels. Then what he is alleging from his tweet from August 12th is that he was making noise. Johns called him into his office, effectively told him to knock it off or else. And that is where the attention shifts to Johns. Because in the tweet, and we've discussed this before on the show, he says LA reshoots, focusing the fact that it's in California. Mm-hmm. Then talks about how
which is important to establish,
which is important to establish, and that it was a thinly veiled threat to his career, which qualifies, because we've asked around, which qualifies as workplace retaliation under California state law. That was when we realized that the implications of these accusations turned, and this is now a legal issue based on this accusation.
Yeah.
So that also plays into why he's not being quite as direct, because there is a legal there's a legal process, legal chain of command that he's going to go through as far as details are concerned.
Yeah.
Well, and he also said on his Instagram video on Sunday, well, he's being vaguer, because the more he shares, that just gives the defense time to build up their case, specifically to take down whatever it is he's going to bring up.
And when you're dealing with an entity like Hollywood, they have guys that do that in their sleep, and have figured that out for generations.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's where I kind of found like the tweet that he did 8 days later, which was the previous one was on August 12th. And then on August 20th, he revealed, and I'll just go ahead and read it. He says, after 5 weeks of interviews with various cast and crew, Warner Media has officially launched an independent third-party investigation to get to the heart of the toxic and abusive work environment created during Justice League reshoots. And he says, this is a massive step forward. And then his follow-up tweet in that chain, he says, I believe this investigation will show that Jeff Johns, Joss Whedon, and John Berg or he said John Berg, and then he put in parentheses and others, which he talked about in the Instagram discussion, grossly abused their power during the uncertainty of AT&T's merger with Time Warner. And he said, thank you, Warner Media and AT&T, for making strides to ensure a safer workplace for all. So his frame of mind at that point in time was like, okay, they're listening, they're taking it seriously. They're going to do some investigation and some progress is going to be made.
And also, this is almost like we have to make our perfunctory statement. Who is he thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Warner Media.
Thank you. I was just about to say,
AT&T.
Can we please highlight that for people? I feel like if we say nothing else to the people watching this, let's please clear that up right now.
Okay. Can we make this like perfectly clear? This is
do
like,
I need a chart? Do I need to do I need to draw?
We might need we might need something. I don't know, but yes, we need to get that clear to everybody now.
There's AT&T guys. Underneath AT&T is Warner Media Entertainment, and underneath Warner Media Entertainment is two different legs. One of them is Warner Brothers Pictures. The other one is Warner Media or Warner Max.
Warner Max, yep.
Which is where HBO and HBO Max are underneath Warner Max.
Yes.
So they're not, even though they're underneath the same portion of the company, they're kind of independent of each other.
They are run as a company.
Yep.
That is owned by another company.
And it is important to note that this is still the case, even though Ann Sarnoff is in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've seen people argue that as well. Like, oh, no, all of that, it's all under one umbrella because Ann Sarnoff is in charge of all of it. No, the divisions still exist, even though Ann Sarnoff is in charge of all of it under Jason Kilar, who is the CEO.
Yeah. And obviously the spirit of the company is they want to bring these divisions and break down these barriers and these silos between the different divisions. But I mean, that's not going to happen immediately. There's so much infrastructure in place that these things aren't, it's not at that point right now. So anyway, just want to make that clear. That's how it's organized right now.
Which means you got to understand that when in a corporate structure like this, the only people who are talking is like the head of one of the companies to the head of the company divisionally above it.
Right.
But it's being run. But the idea, idealistically, is supposed to be Warner Media can let Warner Brothers go do their thing so they can make money for Warner Media. Mm-hmm. Go forth, do the thing you do, make theatrical releases, bring us the money.
And it's the same with, and it's the same with Warner Max as well. Warner Max, here's $4 billion, which is what their budget is. It's what they got earlier this year. Warner Max, here's $4 billion. Do what you do, get subscribers, get numbers, right? Bring forth. Exactly. So
you need to understand that even though all these companies are in the same family, they are effectively still run as their own separate entities.
Yes.
Because that's how corporations, it's corporate, you've corporate, the idea is that you have taken lots of companies and you've brought them in together for the purposes of when you do well, that's good for us. Mm-hmm. But you're still doing the thing you do.
Right. And this works so long as you are helping the parent company. Mm-hmm. The second you start hurting the parent company, that's when the parent company at some point can go, yeah, okay.
Time out.
Yeah. Well, and we've kind of already seen that because, in the middle of all this, there was the bloodletting at Warner Brothers, that Bob Greenblatt and a number of other old school executives got the broom.
Well, they were at HBO Max. So I mean, like there was bloodletting all around.
There was, and in many ways you can kind of look at that and go and basically figure that, because this is all under Jason Kilar, who's been there since May 1st, came over from Hulu. It's basically his way of saying, okay, yeah, no one's safe. There are no sacred cows. There are no sacred cows. We are here for the purpose of making Warner Media better, and you will do it the way that, we're all inclusive here, but we will do it. This is the direction we're going in. Get on board or get out.
And I think so what's important to realize is if you're confused about this, Warner Brothers Pictures was the entity that Ray Fisher is accusing of perpetrating I think he's accusing them of a crime and of bad behavior. He is excited as of August 20th, which, if we remember, was like 2 days before Fandom.
Yes.
His excitement was that the parent companies were investigating Warner Brothers Pictures, because obviously at that date, that was his understanding of how this was shaking out. Warner Media had hired a third-party investigator to go check up on Warner Brothers.
Right. And just to further clarify, the reason that he feels, because this is important when we talk about the stuff that happened recently, he has more faith and trust in Warner Media's ability to run an investigation. One, because it's not Warner Brothers, and two, because they are the new company. It's not the same, there is because AT&T is an ISP, because they're not necessarily like mired in, they're not really connected to the Hollywood studio system, not traditionally speaking, meaning that they are more impartial. They're not necessarily prone to the type of behavior that he is trying to get rid of with respect to accountability greater than entertainment.
Well, and this is where I think our understanding of kind of what was going on changed. On September 4th, Ray tweeted out, "So you can better understand how deep this goes. After speaking out about Justice League, I received a phone call from the president of DC Films." He doesn't name him, but it's Walter Hamada, wherein he attempted to throw Joss Whedon and John Berg under the bus in hopes that I would relent on Jeff Johns. I will not. And then he said, accountability is more important than entertainment.
And Brent, you had an interesting perspective to this, because I remember you brought it up on Fans that week as well.
You have to remind them.
You mean Warner Brothers, like in the response, or just where I was hung up on the name thing?
When you were hung up on the name thing.
Yeah. So if you go back and you look at all these other tweets he's named Whedon, he named Berg, he named Johns by name, and not even like I just did, but like Joss Whedon, John Berg, Jeff Johns, and then we get to this one and it's president of DC Films, which actually for a second threw me for a loop, and I really had to read it several times.
Threw me for a loop too.
Yep. Make sure like I understood the timeline. Like, no, he's talking now. Yeah. He means after he just started speaking out. That's Walter Hamada. This is a whole new game, because prior to that, we had all, at least I definitely, and I think most of us had kind of assumed he was all speaking about the past. Well, this just became the present. What's happening now? It's still, right. He effectively is accusing Hamada of participating in some sort of cover-up in relation to Jeff Johns' actions.
See, and my take on this was, I kind of felt like by not specifically naming him, it was kind of a polite way to say, hey, I'm talking about you, but I'm not really trying to bring you into the forefront just yet.
I actually agree with that, because and this also came up in his Instagram thing where he said, that he went into further detail about what that conversation was like. Mm-hmm. And Hamada was essentially telling him that he didn't think Johns was capable of the behavior that Fisher's accusing him of. And Fisher's response is, you weren't there. Right. You didn't see it. You weren't there. And so I think that's also plays into a part of it, Tim, whereas he's not putting Hamada under necessarily the exact same umbrella as Wiedenberg or Johns, because Hamada wasn't involved in the actual crime. But what he is involved in at this point is the potential sweeping it under the rug of that crime. And that's not alleged. Yes, right. And that's not as egregious as the actual alleged crime, but it is still part of the problem, which is why he highlighted it.
What's your take on this, Chris, so far? I mean, as we've kind of laid this thing out, like, what are your thoughts on this? Because we still got a little bit more to go in this.
Yeah,
story.
That's where the timeline, the thing that I'm not as familiar with is mostly Instagram stuff, because I know he does the live feed a lot. That's what I haven't caught up on. And again, the dates and stuff, God bless you guys. I wasn't aware of how everything played out. But since we were talking about the Hamada thing, that was what I thought was very strange as well. And I don't need to keep, pounding on it because you guys laid it out really well. But it's said to me that either I don't want to say his name maybe now for legal reasons. I don't, maybe he's not implemented in whatever legal case they're presenting yet, or that will come later. I'm looking at these guys and you're down the road. Just wait. I don't really know how to take that, and I guess I'm still not sure. We'll just have to see. But I mean, I don't want to jump ahead of the timeline. So that's why I'm kind of holding back, because the thing that I really got excited about is something that I think we'll get to. I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about, but if I don't know, it's disappointing regardless of the alleged things when it comes to Hamada, who's, I think whenever he was announced and where things were first coming out, we were all very excited about kind of the enthusiasm that he had moving forward. At least, I was, and it's just disappointing that the new, I guess, person in charge of this is now kind of allegedly guilty of, like you said, sweeping something under the rug and kind of trying to make it disappear, which is, like I said, it's insanely disappointing, but we'll see how it shakes out. But I'll let you guys, I'm happy, I'm learning as you guys are talking about the timeline.
Well,
so you guys take it away.
Well, I think that's important, Chris, because I know that sometimes we've had conversations because you've got stuff going on and you're not quite as, jacked into the drama
Correct.
like we are. So I want you to always feel free to jump in, because I feel like you provide a great perspective of what we're trying to achieve here, which is we're trying to have a record where we try to break down what's going on in hopes that people who genuinely have a intellectually honest question about the situation can hopefully glean some additional information. I mean, that's my ultimate goal from this.
Yeah, and the timeline is so important to this, but also breaking down the language that is used and why, especially on Twitter, nobody wants to deal with that.
Yeah,
it's just, he said this thing, it's usually a broad, it's not word for word, and it kind of it muddies things up, because then people, they hear that, but the person didn't quote exactly what say Ray Fisher said. They make a summary in their mind, they repeat that gets repeated, and then it just muddies the water.
Telephone game.
And it's just so people don't understand how important timeline and the language that is used specifically word for word, how important that is to understanding something like this. And like you said, the way it has rolled out and how it got from point A to where we are right now.
Yeah.
And so I think it's awesome to have this too, have a record of it.
And a big reason for that, Chris, goes back to what you were saying about the disappointment that was felt. I mean, I certainly felt it, especially in the wake of the Multiverse 101 panel at DC Fandom, where it really felt like Jim Lee, Walter Hamada, and Greg Berlanti were all on the same page. And now this was kind of the revelation of, I guess Hamada isn't on the same page. And the disappointment goes even further back than that, because after the Justice League debacle initially happened, everybody on some level, me a little bit later than everybody else, wanted some type of retribution or restitution, right? They wanted it wasn't so much that people necessarily wanted a course correction from the direction of where Zack Snyder was taking things, but they wanted a ship righted. They wanted everybody that was involved, that was responsible for that disaster, out. And that happened to a point with Johnsonberg being out and Hamada coming in. Hamada was supposed to be the savior in many ways, or at least the person that was going to get things back on track.
Well, you kept on making the point on fans for the last couple of years that Hamada was a producer. we finally had a producer. That was the drum you were beating.
Yeah,
we
because
finally had a producer in that executive role.
Yeah, because at the time, one of my biggest things about Johns and Berg being in charge is that Johns isn't a producer, and he didn't have the experience. It wasn't, you hear that phrase. I got sick of hearing this sentence for a while, where you kept hearing people say DC needs a Feige. I hated that because I don't like those comparisons, but it wasn't necessarily incorrect. They needed somebody that at least had some type of producing experience, because this is going down the rabbit hole of the slate that got canceled and all the movies that aren't happening, right? You wanted somebody that had experience. Hamada has that experience. He's been with New Line for over a decade. He's groomed to understand the production aspect of Warner Brothers Pictures to be able to handle this. So at the time, yes, Scott, I was beating that drum because it seemed like it was the right way to go. The problem is that structurally that may have been the right way to go, but in terms of the institutionalized system of Hollywood toxicity, it's not the best way to go. In order to promote somebody that has already been a part of that system for however long and knows when to be a yes man and when to keep his mouth shut.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. I mean, the reason he was naming these guys, John Berg, Jeff Johns, Joss Whedon, they were the ones that were there. Hamada wasn't there,
right,
at the time.
Which is something Fisher said in his Instagram video. Yeah. Walter, you weren't there when he back channel communications with me, presumably, so there wasn't a record on things like cut it out or this is going to affect your career. You weren't there when he contacted me to throw it in my face that there's going to be another cyborg on Doom Patrol. And yeah, so this is where which is interesting to hear that, considering how supportive Ray Fisher has always been of Doom Patrol's incarnation of Cyborg. But so yeah, it's like Fisher just flat out says Hamada wasn't there. It's all before his time. He just doesn't know. And just because Hamada had a positive experience on Shazam with Jeff Johns doesn't mean that, and Hamada should ask, he should inquire, but it doesn't mean he should just disregard what Fisher's telling him because he doesn't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like, he's basically telling, Walter, hey, are you sure you want to, is this a hill you want to die on, right?
That is what he's saying.
That is what he's saying. And I think it's also important for people who may be a little bit more skeptical, who maybe wonder why we on this call are so much more inclined to believe what Ray is saying. Because that's another criticism that comes up. And it gets kind of tricky because you're basically saying this kid is a nobody. Why are you listening to him? But
that's exactly why.
That's exactly why, though.
Right. Yeah. That's
I
exactly.
think that because you have to look at him and go, they're like, well, why is he doing this? It's going to ruin his career.
Yeah.
Then
why would he do this if
he wasn't sincere? Tell you something?
Yeah. You have to ask, what does somebody have to gain by lying? If you want to know, is someone lying in this situation? Well, what do they have to gain if they're lying? Fisher has basically nothing to gain by lying about this. Definitely nothing personally for himself.
No.
So if he doesn't have anything to gain by lying, the only logical conclusion is he's probably not lying. And I mean, that's pretty much how it boiled down to me. It's like, am I saying that there's absolutely no room for doubt? No, I'm not saying that. But logically, I can't come to a conclusion where he's making it up. It doesn't make sense.
No, I certainly believe him because I've seen enough of him. Just looking at the scenario about why he would even come forward and do it, it doesn't add up. Like, he has nothing to gain from this thing. But even just kind of the many times we've watched him at his Twitch streams, or the times he's done some of the Instagram videos, and mostly Twitch. But like, you listen to this guy talk, this guy is about as genuine as you can get. And you look at and see what's important to him and what he tweets out. I believe this guy. And so,
I'm sorry, Warner Brothers has given me more than enough reason
to
not to believe them.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the other part of this. Like, everything that you guys are saying in terms of Fisher not having anything to gain by lying. Yes, that is enough. That is enough of a reason to say that. But for me, Yes, Scott, any one of us that's a DC fan over the last 3 years, we can think of a few reasons not to trust Warner Brothers brass when they tell us something. But even beyond that, for me, I've heard Ray Fisher's story way too many times in Hollywood in general. I said this the other day on Twitter, for every Ray Fisher that has our attention, there are dozens, maybe hundreds that, got chewed up and spit out by the Hollywood system and never had a chance to defend themselves for the same toxicity that's happened to them. And if people, it's not difficult to do some Googling and find some real stories, some things that will be corroborated by several other people about the toxicity that has existed in Hollywood for decades, especially with respect to minorities. So that's just the extra bonus for me to believe him, because I've heard his story before and I know it happens. And I am not someone, and people may think this is unfair. That's fine if you feel that way. I don't believe any movie studio deserves the benefit of the doubt when it comes to this. I really don't, because I've heard these stories from all of them. I've heard these stories from creatives and actors and everyone, from all of them. This is old Hollywood culture that he's going up against. So,
well, let's close this thing out and
made movies about this.
They have.
Yeah. Right.
They have. There have been movies, documentaries. Yes. It's like you said the other day, Scott, it's documented. It's well documented. And so that's, I guess I've seen and read way too much of that to not believe Ray Fisher on this.
Right. Well, let's kind of bring this up to where we're at today, because then this kind of gets to the interesting question about, why would Walter Hamada want to defend Geoff Johns? Because then we can give some insight into that. So let's, because like shortly after Ray put out this tweet implicating Walter Hamada, it was, I think, the next night.
No, it was the same night.
It was the same night, right?
Because
same night, yes.
Ray tweeted about
1 p.m. Eastern.
1 p.m. Eastern. Okay. And then at 11 p.m. Eastern, the same night, going into a 3-day weekend of Labor Day, they put out the most vanilla press release you have ever read. I thought it was very interesting when Ray Fisher pointed out there were no quotes in the press release.
No quotes.
I knew what it meant, that when you drop something, not only at the end of a news day, like I've always heard about, you drop something on a Friday to bury something. That's just,
this was a try to get the last word,
right?
For a long holiday weekend. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And basically their accusation, I felt on the same level of the John Berg booyah comment, was he's not cooperating with us. It was creative different. Like he was been approached, he wasn't happy with the direction. And I had a problem going, so you're saying that a guy brought you accusations that you were investigating and now he's not cooperating. And Brent, you pointed out a particularly troublesome wording in part of the press release.
Yeah, and I just caught in that same part, I just found another part that makes me frustrated. So quoting from the press release, it said, while Mr. Fisher never alleged any actionable misconduct against him, meaning Whedon, Warner Media nevertheless initiated an investigation. So there's actually two problems with that. I was hung up with one problem until literally right before this, where the first problem is, if there was no actionable information, why are you investigating? If you come to me and say, hey, I have this problem and I think there's nothing actionable there, then what action would I take? I wouldn't take any actions. The other problem is it says Warner Media initiated this investigation, but it was Warner Brothers that did. And this press release came from Warner Brothers, but they're saying Warner Media did it. Thinking back to earlier when we were talking about the org chart, let's look at Disney. This would be like Marvel putting out a press release and saying Star Wars is doing this investigation.
Lucasfilm, yeah.
You got two totally different divisions of the company. And you may have the same parent company, but you are separate entities. And that one line there's nothing actionable, but we're taking action. Well, you're contradicting yourself in that sentence.
Well,
and you're talking about another company is doing it when it wasn't them, it was you.
Yeah.
Right. So it's contradiction and it's potentially lying because, and this goes into what happened the following morning when Ray responded to that, because basically it's all, in many ways, I feel like Warner Brothers' statement was intended to confuse people further. And all the explanation that we just had about the difference between Warner Media and Warner Brothers, it's like Warner Brothers doesn't want anybody to know that. Warner Brothers wants everybody to believe that they are one and the same when they're not, so that they can use that wording in the statement and go, oh, no, it's fine. He's being uncooperative, and that's uncooperative is a word I would not use to describe someone of Ray Fisher's persuasion with respect to an investigation. That's all I'll say about that. I'm sure people listening to this know what I'm talking about, but yeah, like it felt like they wanted to get the last word and they wanted to confuse the situation further so that people could press the easy button and go with that takeaway into the weekend.
Because the press release immediately, it was delivered to us through the Wrap, Variety, Hollywood Report, like all the trades.
And who was the first? The
Wrap.
The Wrap.
Right. And that's your first that's your first red flag.
Yeah.
Your first red flag is this didn't come. Boris Kitt got this after Umberto did. That's the wrong chain to go through. And I don't say that purely because of the Wrap. I say it because it doesn't follow the protocol that has been followed in the past. When it's an important story that they want in the news cycle,
They go to Boris Kitt.
They go to Boris Kitt, or they go to Justin Kroll. They go to or Brent Lang. They go to one of those guys first. They put it out, and then everybody gets it from them, not the Wrap or anybody else.
And then I think what was impressive about Ray, though, was when he responded, he had the email regarding the exact situation that the press release was trying to bury him under. Because the email states, I talked with the investigator, has the dates of when he talked to the investigator, has the date of when he sent the email to his legal team. And in the email, he details that I was talking to the investigator. It was clear to me that this investigator was not a third party hired by Warner Media. And there was somebody else on the line that no one told me someone else was going to be on the line, which also meant that I didn't have a chance to have somebody else on the line with me. He wanted his rep.
Right.
He wanted his rep on there, so that there was multiple witnesses from all parties there. And so he said, "No, I'm not talking to you. This is not in good faith."
So looking at the timing of this thing, this was August 26th, which that's right, August 26th. That's 6 days after he had sent the tweet saying, after 5 weeks of interviews, Warner Media has officially launched an independent third-party investigation. So 6 days earlier, Ray was under the impression that this was going to be an independent investigation to look into, look into the allegations that he was making. And it turns out, apparently, according to this documented email that he had made, that it was not Warner Media, it was Warner Brothers Pictures.
Right.
So
that's why part of why people get confused on what's what. I made the Lucasfilm and Marvel comparison earlier, the Star Wars and Marvel. Here it's Warner Brothers, Warner Media, Warner Max. They're all so similar, and I think the branding is nice. It lets you know we are dealing with the same overall company, but in these kind of messy situations, it does create a fog, if you will.
Well, and the fog is either further compounded, Brent, by the fact that you're not even, the merger is still fresh, right? The purchase, AT&T's purchase of everything is still, the ink is just a little dry. I mean, it's not totally dry on it, right? So they're still shuffling the deck. They're still reshuffling, and I suspect more reshuffling is going to occur as a result of this.
And a point of what he says in his email was, his findings will go directly and solely to Warner Brothers Pictures Legal. So Ray's concern that he is stating to the public is, so you mean the very people that I'm accusing, their legal team gets the findings?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, if you can't see how troublesome that is.
Yeah.
That was the reason for the investigator to be third party. That was why he was excited about the idea that it was Warner Media who was going to get the findings.
Right.
Because he wanted the parent to find out what was being said about the child.
Exactly. This is like when your brother and sister get into a fight and you have a grievance. One of you has a grievance against the other. And you're like, Mom, Dad, investigate this. But instead, brother or sister says, oh, that's okay. I'll take care of it. Give me all of your evidence against me and I'll take care of it. Right.
Right.
You know, which one of us broke the lamp? You broke the lamp. Well, I'll determine whether or not I broke the lamp or not. We don't need Mom or Dad to decide that.
Yeah.
Are you speaking from experience right now, Ray?
No, I'm not. I was the firstborn, so the pressure was all on me to be the good kid. So no, I had the overdeveloped super ego and was like the really super good kid. I'm not lying. That's literally how I was. But yeah, no, that was just an
we're
analogy.
supposed to believe him, Brent. Remember,
That's
I'm just thinking, what happened?
That's just an analogy. Hey, my dad. You have to remember, guys. My dad, 26-year Detroit police veteran. My mom is a school teacher. I lived in a very authoritative household. It rubs off on you. That's all.
Sorry, Brett.
So, yeah. So Chris, so this gets us to the Instagram video and the Twitch stream he did, which Tim, you took some very good notes about both of those. Could you give us just? I'll lay a little carpet so you can actually bring it up. But
yeah, I'm doing it right now.
But I would like you to really just. I mean, you don't have to hit everything because you took very detailed notes. But what are those high takeaway points? Because that was the thing. It was like Warner Brothers puts out this press statement on Friday night, and then instead of, going sweetly to that good night, Ray Fisher just decided to own the weekend.
He did. So I'm going to quote this one because this was kind of significant. This is from his words. I think I got it mostly word for word. Warner Brothers had the audacity to put out a statement like that. They have set themselves up, unfortunately, for a lot of issues. They do not know how many receipts I have for interactions that I've had. They do not know the people that I have been talking to. They do not know the people that I have that are willing to be able to take part in the investigation. And that, unfortunately, is something that is going to jam them up in a big way. It was a bold move of them to go out and say that I was not attempting to communicate or that I was attempting to avoid the investigator. So he's very confident. He's got a lot of so-called receipts, right? He's got a lot of things that kind of back up his claims, or at least he's got a lot of witnesses. Ray's thing is like he's very concerned about these people that want to come forward. He's very concerned about making sure that they're protected. And so he's not going to name these people, and these people are not going to come forward until he's got assurances that they're going to be protected. And that's why the whole thing with Warner Brothers hiring this lawyer, I guess, is what we think has happened here. That's where it's problematic. And so it's not giving that kind of protection that he would need here. So that's kind of where the fight's at right now.
And the speculation that I have is this really does sound like Ray Fisher putting out a call to AT&T and Warner Media saying, come get your boy Warner Brothers. It really sounds like it's like one saying Warner Brothers, back the truck up.
Mm-hmm.
And two, Warner Media, AT&T. You see what's going on here? I really think you need to step in. That is how I am interpreting the information.
I would agree with that. I would very much agree with that, and not just because of, listen, like I said, Kalar took over as CEO on May 1st. We all know what happened on May 20th, and we have all noted and documented how the massive 180 that everything is taken under Warner Media's direction since May 20th. It is astounding. Yesterday, the TNT drama account tweeted Henry Cavill, #HenryCavillSuperman.
Right, which was a fan initiated hashtag event,
right,
by followers and listeners and friends of ours. I mean, it was just like, I knew who started that. It was Steb Bob 1984. He started that.
Right.
And
so
to see
that's cool.
TNT drama just go with it.
So we've all seen the massive shift and the massive change in the mindset, and we know that that's not coming from Warner Brothers. So we know that there is a direction that Warner Media is taking that everybody considers favorable, and it goes again into the bigger picture of the streamers taking a different direction in general with the industry than the studios are, and that is at present a more progressive direction, a direction that is not steeped in the old Hollywood ways that he's trying to get rid of. So yeah, I do think in many ways he's waving to Kilar and the progressive. Hey, you see what old Hollywood is doing?
Right.
Get old Hollywood out of this. Like, stop doing that. I'm sorry, it looked like I was pointing to Chris. I'm not pointing to Chris. I was just pointing in general. But like,
I don't know.
Chris is old Hollywood.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing too, Ray. I mean, it's the whole thing. If you kind of follow Jason Kilar's tweets, and you can kind of get a sense of like what's important to him. This is anti. This is against everything that Jason Kilar is trying to stand for, personally, and then also what he wants the corporation to stand for.
Absolutely. This flies in the and I've said this on fans at least a few times. I've postulated that, Brett and I have been charting the streaming wars as for a while now to see what everybody's position and what their moves are. And you see what's happening with all this theatrical stuff as a result of the pandemic. Universal made their decision, made their call, and they're dealing with AMC. Disney made their call, and what has now turned out to be a riskier call than we thought with Mulan. Brent, I don't know if you've read any of the stuff on that, but it's very interesting how that situation has developed.
Yeah, I've seen some of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got Disney going in that direction. And now and then you have Warner Brothers that from the beginning is like, we're committed to the theatrical model. Look at they drag their feet on Tenet, and they just keep pushing, even with HBO Max existing, even with the fact that they have a streaming platform, we're pushing dates back. We're pushing dates back. It's going to go, it's going to come out in theaters. It's theaters. We're committed to theaters. Sarnoff's last week, we're committed to theaters. Okay. So Warner Brothers is clearly going to be the most stubborn when it comes to adapting the digital position, which isn't really going to fly for too much longer with somebody like Kilar, who understands where all this is headed and wants to take it in that direction.
And so I feel like to bring Chris back into it, because I know that he's just been chomping at the bit for what happened yesterday on Labor Day. Chris, why don't you do the honors? What made you so happy, sir?
I mean, Momoa jumped in publicly backing Fisher on Instagram, correct? Was that where he
was on
made?
And he doesn't have. I don't think he has. Instagram. He doesn't have a Twitter. Yeah, I don't. He doesn't have a Twitter.
Gotcha. And that is, I mean, it's a big deal, and it's a heavy hitter now.
That's arguably the heavy hitter out of those six, because he's the only one of them that's made $1 billion by himself.
There you go. I mean,
what's her name? Karen Bryson or what? This is not support from like a small actor. This is a major important person for Warner Brothers Pictures and presumably HBO Max.
His sequel is greenlit.
Yeah.
The sequel to his $1 billion movie is greenlit and
there's
has a release date.
Zero chance it's not happening. It's like that. Right. That is one of their top priorities because, like you said, $1 billion.
And he's in another Warner Brothers distributed release that's coming out eventually with Dune.
Yeah,
because he's Duncan, Idaho.
You don't mean the Frosty one?
I'm not talking about Frosty.
No, we were not talking about that.
We're not talking about Frosty. I'm talking about Dune that has a trailer coming out tomorroh. He's in it.
By the way, you mentioned the whole Frosty thing. I'm sorry. I want to bring this thing up. You got to remember, he comes out and says, I stand with Ray Fisher. Jeff Johns is a producer on that Frosty film. Like, how important is this that, Jason Momoa came out and did this thing? This flies completely in the face of the battle, or if it actually goes right into the battle that Ray Fisher is fighting right now.
Yeah.
It's enormously significant.
I agree completely. But does anybody else think that the Frosty thing was fake and thrown out there when it was thrown out there to, I don't know, kind of gloat or just throw mud in the face of what Ray Fisher was bringing up?
Sort
That's
of
the way I took it. I was like, this seems a little ridiculous, but maybe I'm wrong.
It was an attempt to provide some sort of evidence against what Fisher was saying. It's like, well, see, Momoa likes Jeff Johns. So
even though he never publicly said that,
right? I didn't say it was a good attempt.
No, no, but to that end, Brent, that's kind of the point here. Is it seems like every one of Warner Brothers' attempts is not a good one. Can we think of a good response throughout this entire time? I mean, have they responded?
Them not saying anything has been
their
best
actually
response.
Whedon and Johns directly have had the best response. They've been quiet. To seriously answer your question, that is the best move any of them can make right now.
They've been quiet publicly for sure. I will say this. I think we talked about this, Scott, at the time. The whole Frosty thing, we kind of took that as like that was kind of like a warning shot to Jason Momoa, like, oh, you don't get involved in this.
Because of Frosty? What do you do?
Well, no, just because just basically saying, hey, remember, you're part of all this.
Because you got to remember. When people started questioning who was going to be the first member of the league to back Ray up, who's the one person that all popped into our heads?
I was going to say, I didn't think that was a question at all. I'm like, dude, we all know this answer.
Momoa's the one I most wanted to hear from because I thought he was the most likely to say what he wants. And he is he's protected, I think. Like Ray said, you don't make that much money individually headlining a superhero movie and get thrown out the door. It's not going to happen.
I would argue that the only other personality connected to DC films right now that has more cachet than him is Dwayne Johnson. I don't think there's anyone else currently affiliated with a DC film that I think it's I can't think of it. And I know somebody's going to say Gall. I hear you, but I don't feel like if we're talking about worldwide appeal or like wider appeal, right? Gall is Wonder Woman, of course, no question. But if you're just talking about overarching, if one of these people were let go tomorrow, would heads roll across the planet, right?
I agree with you. I do think there's an important distinction. Gall is Wonder Woman. The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, is going to be Black Adam.
But it's still The Rock.
It is. And I get it. You don't want to lose the association of Dwayne Johnson with Warner Brothers. It's just his association with DC, it's still at the nerd level. It's not at the mainstream public level yet.
But himself is at the mainstream public level.
Sure.
And that's where that becomes the bigger issue.
And Momoa has kind of with his appearance, with his steady career trajectory between Baywatch, Stargate, Game of Thrones. I mean, my mother-in-law knows who Jason Momoa is. She wanted to see Aquaman because of Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Momoa of that crew, Momoa has that broad, the nerd appeal, but then also that generalized. He's not the box office draw, say like a Dwayne Johnson, but he's but he's got that. He's got that general audience. People know who he is for some reason, and his solo movie made up over $1 billion. So when I saw Ray tweet out that Instagram story and realized it said Pride of Gypsies in the corner with Ray wearing that shirt from the 2017 Comic-Con, from remember that tweet that started this whole conversation, and he just said hashtag I stand with Ray Fisher. And look what happened today. Deadline, Variety, Hollywood Reporter. Jason Momoa backs up, like it became the story. And they were even using the hashtag in their tweets.
And even further, he can do that even when he's in the middle of negotiating deals or with this Frosty movie Momoa has projects in the pipe that are about to be released and stuff that's in pre-production. and he still has enough cash on his own to be able to do this and be untouchable. Whereas I feel like Gull, she's still promoting Wonder Woman 1984. She's got to stay quiet.
She's got to stay quiet for that. But also she's had allegedly some things that she could be upset about with this whole production as well.
Yes, that is true.
So we don't know if she's one of those people that want to talk but just can't.
That is very true. That is a very good point.
We need to kind of wrap up this discussion, but let's kind of get to the point about like, okay, so what happens to Jeff Johns, right? So, why would Walter Hamada, why would the corporation want to protect Jeff Johns? And let's see if we can kind of explain that, because there's a real simple reason. Jeff Johns is very heavily tied to so much of these things, these plans that have been in motion. We're not talking about just Justice League. We're not talking about, we're talking about he's been
producer. A writer creator with DC since at least 1999.
Yeah.
And you are not involved narratively and then later executively with a company for that period of time and have that much story input, character input, mythology input.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the other day,
let go.
The other day we were talking, and Scott, you just like briefly off the top of your head thought of just all these different projects in the comic side that Jeff Johns has been like the narrative driving force for. And then how many of those are we now seeing brought to live action between television and movies? And it is an awful lot of them.
He basically read a fourth of my list, which by the way is also at least half of what he sent me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, Green Lantern. Gotta read that. What else? Well, whatever. He's a lot of stuff.
So much.
Green Lantern, JSA, Stars and Stripe,
Teen
Titans.
Let's be clear.
Rebirth.
Let's be clear. Jeff Johns on creative side in the comics, aside from all this other stuff on the business side and with the movie side, which we think, he was just completely bumbled. On the creative side, he's had huge contributions to the mythology and to the intellectual property, and that's kind of the problem. So you've got the corporation acknowledging that, and also acknowledging the fact that they have him involved in lots of current projects.
Wonder Woman 1984.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Stargirl,
Green Lantern.
Yeah.
Green Lantern.
So that's what they're trying to do is so they're trying to find a way through this. And that flies in the face of what Ray's trying to get, basically the whole accountability thing that flies in the face with that whole message. It's you're not showing accountability if you're just trying to sweep this underneath the rug.
Right.
So.
Right. And from what we've heard, from what we've read, this really does sound like a situation where Warner Brothers kind of allowed Johns to entrench himself as deeply into the future of their franchise as he has.
Mm-hmm.
But I will go ahead and posit this, and you guys, all of you, Chris included, you tell me what you think of this. This is my own personal speculation. I've mentioned this on Fans. I'm not necessarily going to call this my Babe Ruth, because I don't know if this is going to happen, but this is my own pure speculation. Because with respect to everything that is happening, and I still feel at the end of the day, the battle between Warner Brothers and Warner Media is going to be won by Warner Media. At the end of the day, Warner Media will get their way, which means that the old school studio will not get their way, and we could potentially see some more shakeup as a result of that. We did find out, we talked to you guys, the four of us talked about this on DC Films Squadcast about Cherry, the former Activision boss that is now what is he? General manager of DC?
General manager of DC Comics.
DC
right.
Comics, yeah.
And you had brought up, Scott, the whole idea of him being it's this newly created role, and that line that was written about freeing up Jim Lee to do other things across. So guys, I feel like if this goes south for Warner Brothers, like I really do think it will, if Kalar wants to squash this. And oh, by the way, we are 3 days away from Fandom Part 2. Do you really want this to keep going? like through Fandom Part 2. No, you don't. If it hurts Fandom Part 2, Kalar will really not be happy. I feel like within the next, why don't we just say 6 months? It would not surprise me if Jim Lee is in charge of DC Films at some point within the next 6 months. It would not surprise me. What do you guys think about that?
I think you're spot on.
Yeah.
You think it's going to happen? Okay.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think if this isn't taken seriously, by Warner Brothers Pictures, then I think something's going to happen.
Because let's look at how much Jim Lee. Who's the one individual who was all over Fandom? Jim Lee. Whose name, especially since May 20th, have we heard over and over again in nothing but glowing terms?
We can go back to January, the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover. Guggenheim, really, I feel like that's where it started, Scott. When Guggenheim specifically mentioned him in that Ezra Miller crossover, it was like, oh, all right. And then that was like, it got the initial, but of course you're right. May 20th. Yes. It's been Jim Lee this, Jim Lee that, for sure.
And here's the thing too, guys, we got to realize all this stuff is so incredibly complicated. Any kind of moves that are going to be made, like the chances of these things happening are actually pretty low, but like, it's going to be hard to remove people over this unless they specifically were doing something wrong, and that's really the crux of this thing. When we talk about like, okay, could Walter Hamada be in jeopardy? Probably not, right? But the thing is, there's going to be immense pressure on him to try to right this ship and try to get this thing resolved, and so that's going to kind of be on him to try to figure that thing out. The same thing with Jeff Johns is like, even if they kind of move away from Jeff Johns, he's not going away anytime soon. He's still heavily involved in all these properties. You're going to see his name attached to all these films for like the next 3-4 years. He's not going to go away. There just has to be this situation just has to be held accountable somehow, and they have to find a way to kind of get past this and come to a resolution that kind of fixes some of these things, some of these wrongs that were made. So that's my personal opinion on this thing. I just don't, I don't think you're going to see a total cleaning of the house.
So I don't know if I totally agree with that.
Yeah. I think that's what we would all like to see. I just don't think it's that easy to do.
No, I don't think it's necessarily easy to do, but I guess that's why, Tim, I go back to Warner Media and Warner Brothers butting heads in terms of philosophies. Mm-hmm. If Warner Brothers continues to drag their feet on what Kalar's philosophy ultimately is, yes, he'll clean house. Because at that point, you're costing them money, and everybody's losing money this year, no matter what.
But that's where I think, you're going to want that's where I think the people will adjust. Like, I think at some point in time, if Walter Hamada wants to stay in that position, he's going to have to adjust.
True.
And he's going to have to do something that's going to rectify the situation. And most of the people that are in these kinds of jobs is like, they're survivors. They want to be there. Like, they don't want to lose that position. So I think ultimately, I'm guessing that's probably where this is going to go.
Is everyone okay with that if that happens? Like, if let's say that accountability does occur, but it also means that Hamada and Warner Brothers, get on board, because it's clear they're not at this point. But let's say they do get on board. Are we okay with that?
If they're truly on board, yes. If I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. If give people a chance to change and to kind of fix some of the wrongs of the past and just kind of set a new way of doing things. You got to give people a chance to to evolve.
How about everybody else? What do you think? Are you good with that? If are you good with mea culpas? If it really seems like Kalar comes in and says, "Hey, shape up or ship out," and they do shape up, there is that possibility, like Tim is saying. They do shape up. Are you good with that? Or do you ultimately want to say no and want to see Jim Lee take this whole thing over?
it's hard to say. I mean, I want to say yes, but it's almost kind of like, well, what does that really look like when it comes to accountability? Yeah, obviously moving forward, being progressive and doing better. Is that enough? That's where I'm like, I really don't know, because I don't know what it really looks like. All of what Tim was just describing, I don't know what that looks like moving forward. Like, yeah, because it's like, Jeff Johns is responsible for a lot of the back catalog, that a lot of what y'all mentioned, but that's even just a fraction of it. Like DC's income. It'd be like if Alan Moore did something and like got canceled. It's like, well, we can't print the 111th edition of Watchmen, which is a huge income push for them. Like they're losing a lot of income if they're really canceling that name. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be deserved to lose it, but I'm thinking coming from DC and Warner Brothers, that's a lot of money that they're losing. So it's kind of like, that's not satisfying to me necessarily. Again, we'll see what it looks like, but to be like, you know what, he said he's sorry and they'll do better. And Jeff Johns and people, if alleged things, come to light, obviously to be the case, I don't know if that's satisfying to where it's like, but everything's pretty much the same except for maybe the content. That's what I mean. It's like, what does it look like moving forward from what we're going to see as an audience, for them to get on board? That's where I'd kind of have to see. It's like, do we notice a big change in
that's
where the focuses are,
But would we, I almost feel like what Fisher is going for doesn't really affect what we see. I think what Fisher is going for is really going to be more of that culture behind this. Like it's the stuff,
how you operate as a business, as a company, and how you treat people.
And so I don't feel like anything for the foreseeable future would be something that we would notice, because it's nothing that affects the end product for the most part. We can all point to Justice League,
sure,
but I really feel like my major concern is, are the goals achieved? If we're saying accountability is greater than entertainment, is accountability put in place legitimately, in good faith, wholeheartedly? Do people, if someone committed an actual crime, are there consequences? Legitimate consequences?
Yeah. And I guess that's what I mean too, is like, what, when the hammer falls, what is it going to look like? So what are the consequences in these situations? So that's, I guess, what I was sort of trying to wrap up too. So better said on your part, obviously, but accountability, that's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, accountability may ultimately be, that better protections are put in place for, all the creatives, on all the actors, on the set. If there's like kind of a structural change inside the corporation, at least specifically Warner Brothers Pictures, that can be the component of accountability that we ultimately get. So I don't know. It's complicated, guys. I mean, like none of this is going to be easy. If there are specific,
get your final word in. What were you thinking?
Yeah. Couple things. So, Ray, you had said if there was true change, would we be okay with the current regime with Hamada staying where he's at, or would we really insist on, as if it was our choice, being Jim Lee? I will say, forgive me, I don't remember which of you said it. I think it was you, Scott. The other night we were all talking off air, we weren't recording or anything, and you had commented on John's wanting to be Feige, not the Twitter people saying DC needs a Feige, but Jeff Johns wanting to be what Kevin Feige is to Marvel. Johns wanted to be that to DC Films. And part of why that didn't work, part of it is probably John's lack of experience in movie production. Now, I know he has stuff going as far back as working with Richard Donner. I know it's not like he's never worked on it, but he doesn't have the experience that Feige had when he became president of Marvel Studios. He hadn't worked in it that much. That is entrenched. And so just to acknowledge the entertainment side, Jim Lee doesn't have that movie experience either. He's getting more and more, but he doesn't have it either. So him being president of DC Films, from that perspective, I am a little leery there just because of his lack of experience. It doesn't mean he can't get a good team to work with him to fill in the gaps. Just bringing that up. The other thing is, Scott, you mentioned how it's got to be true growth, and you have to allow for people to grow and change. If you never, if you just always say you were this, you can never be better, you will never improve. Obviously, there's limits, but from what we've heard, I don't think John's is necessarily past those limits. I certainly don't think Hamada has passed those limits by saying, hey, can we lay off this guy? If you don't allow for growth and change, nobody will ever try to grow and change. Nobody will ever try to better themselves, to become a better person. And so you do kind of have to acknowledge sometimes, hey, we're going to, not give you the benefit of the doubt of ignoring everything that's happened, but we're going to see if there's a way we can work together going forward. One person, though, that I think could really ease a lot of concerns, if it was going to continue to be, would be Ray Fisher himself. If he came out and said, I like the plans they're putting in place, I like the conversations they're having, I think that we're moving in a good direction, but you better believe I'm going to tell you if my opinion on that changes. That would go a long way towards easing people's concerns over any of these people. I mean, he could ease a lot of concerns over John's himself if somehow he said that. No, I don't think that's ever going to happen, but it might with Hamada. I do foresee a scenario where that sort of thing happens with Hamada. So that's just the kind of stuff I've been thinking of the last few minutes when Ray had asked that question.
It really comes down to, does he want a pound of flesh, or does he want change that's going to lasting change in the way things are done?
Right.
So I think he wants change, personally.
That's my impression as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Guys, we went
hour and a
half
half
hour over what we were planning.
Oh, and no, to the shock of no
To the
one.
shock
No
of
one.
nobody.
No one at all.
Told you.
So do you guys want to see if there's any comments or anything that we want to address?
I've been watching. There's been a few.
I've been looking at some. I tried to kind of indirectly.
Number one, Pure Genius Lego pointed out that today's Ray Fisher's birthday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Happy birthday, Ray Fisher.
By
When
the way,
David
David Ayer,
David Ayer tweeted at him just while we were doing this, happy birthday, and Fisher replied with release the air cut. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
That's cool. Yeah.
But there's been a few questions throughout this that have been brought up. I think it was, let me see if I can find it.
Someone earlier did ask about the different. This was a while ago, but
that's what I was looking for
with this and Ezra's situation.
I think it was Clay, but I could be wrong.
It might have been. Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, essentially,
it was Fanboy Clay.
Yeah, I mean, Clay. Essentially, the difference is, I mean, aside from the fact that was a half a day story and there were no police and there's no further investigation and it's definitely over. It also didn't happen on Warner Brothers property. Mm-hmm. So there's somebody was commenting on Twitter not too long ago, like, why doesn't Warner Brothers address it? Somebody said that today. Why isn't anyone from Warner Brothers addressed the situation with Ezra Miller? Didn't happen on one of their films.
Yeah.
Didn't happen on they wouldn't be able to legally say anything if it happened outside of their purview. And this is, if anything else came out as a result of it, but nothing has. That story literally died.
Mm-hmm.
Like
the
same day. And it's only been, the only reason it comes up is because people want more answers when there's nothing else to give.
And the Ezra story is effectively dead right now. I wouldn't be surprised if it did come back up when the Flash movie gets close, like when a press tour starts to happen, whatever that will look like then. I wouldn't be surprised if it starts to come back up a little bit then. But right now, yeah, it is. I mean, I rewatched the video. Like, I pulled it up today after seeing that comment, and I rewatched the video, and you still, like, you just can't tell any context. The video looks bad, but you see nothing before, you see nothing after, and there's been no charges filed. Mm-hmm. It's hard to draw a conclusion.
Completely.
What are the questions?
Saw some Brent, did you what else?
I'm scrolling through now. Something I'm learning is I should have just copied them as I saw them.
Has anybody read Three Jokers?
I've read issue number 1.
You have? Okay.
Mm-hmm. I
did. What are you thinking so far?
I was talking to Jordan about this. I am probably going to, before I make any kind of public statement, I'm going to wait till I read all 3 issues. Because Chris, you can jump in here if you've read it, but issue number 1 was just kind of like it was all set up. So I'm going to wait and see how where's it, because I've been anticipating this ever since that whole topic got when the concept was introduced at the very end of Darkseid War. I've been like, where's this going?
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of like, after issue 1, I'm kind of like,
Yeah.
He's got a lot to do in issues 2 and 3. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. And they're a little bit longer than standard length. I think they might be 48 pages.
Yeah, they're Black Label books. So.
Oh, are they really that long?
Yeah.
I've been in my head going back and forth on whether or not. I at one point texted Ray and said, "Are you going to read this? Because if you are, I'll buy it and we can talk about it on the show." He wasn't, to put words in your mouth, getting to it anytime soon. So I'm like, I'm torn between spending the $6 or whatever it is now, or waiting for DC Universe in a year.
I feel like if I read anything new that isn't something Scott sent me, he'll
he'll get over it.
He'll give me the Superman red eyes, like under anti-life equation control. Just like, oh, it's the nightmare.
So I mean, yeah, I enjoyed the first issue, but Scott is right. I mean, it's a lot of setup. A lot of it, I think, is just it's not on the book in the sense of like it's not what I was expecting it to. The type of story I thought it was going to be.
Exactly.
So it's just kind of adjusting, and like I think probably while I did enjoy it, it's really going to see how they stick the landing, So
see if it's going to be another Doomsday Clock situation.
Right.
Yeah, like if it's very clear having to adjust to other things.
That's it. I'll read it when it's out. Let me know when issue 3 is available.
Yeah.
I saw here somebody saying Classy Ulysses says the hardcover is coming out in this November. Is that right?
Yeah.
That wouldn't be surprised because the point was that they didn't even start marketing it until all 3 issues were like Fabok was like halfway through drawing issue 3 before they even like solicited it.
Meaning Johns was done writing because he may have been the hang up on some of this stuff. Here's a couple other questions. One from Pure Genius Lego. He wants to know what the best way is we can support Ray or push WB into making a lasting change.
To be very honest with you, I think one of the biggest things that you can do to support Ray, believe it or not, is supporting Zack Snyder's Justice League. And the reason I say that is because right now, in terms of his career, that's the next biggest thing he's got.
That's it, yeah.
And a lot of people are concerned, and I know a lot of fans are concerned about whether or not this is going to torpedo his career. And I'm concerned about it. I don't want it to. I have reasons why I don't think it will be, because of current climate with respect to his situation and his persuasion. I'll just go ahead and say it, because he's a black actor, because he is a young black actor. That will look, someone was suggesting this on Twitter, like, this whole thing about him possibly being in the Flash movie. What would happen? Is there a possibility that Warner Brothers would recast Victor Stone in the DCEU or cut him out of the movie? I think either one of those decisions would make this a lot worse from a PR standpoint for Warner Brothers. I do. I think that'd be poison.
It'd be easy not to put him in Flash, but if they put a different Victor Stone in Flash, that won't go well.
No, it won't. So I think that, I personally think he's going to be okay. But if you really want to be certain that he's going to be okay, if you really want to support his career, then support Zack Snyder's Justice League, because he's supposed to have the more expansive role, and that could end up being his new breakout, because he really hasn't aside from Cyborg in the theatrical version of the movie and True Detective.
Yeah, season 3 of True Detective.
That's his career.
And then also there's that new shirt that launched on Ink to the People today, the I Heart RF shirt, which all the proceeds go to help charity close to him, the Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts.
Okay, I didn't know that. All right.
Yep.
That's another way. But yeah, those are the ways.
He's now buying a shirt. He's doing it right now. I think it's important to remember regarding his career, and I know we talked about this the other night again when we were off air, but there is a whole lot more available to an actor right now than there was 5-10 years ago. Yes. It's not just the movie studios.
Yeah.
Because Netflix, HBO Max, Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, Peacock,
they're not all going to blacklist
access, whatever
they're
else.
Not all going to blacklist.
No, because they're going to say, they're going to look at what he's done. They're going to look at what they're going to say. We can do something with him. We can bring him in. Plus, he's probably going to show up in future Snyder properties. I would be shocked if he didn't show up
He will
in
be
future
in every
Snyder
Snyder film from here on out, I bet.
And so I think his career might be different. I don't think it's over. I really don't. I think if you are a fan of Ray Fisher as an actor, Justice League is not the last time you will see him.
I would say just kind of follow Ray's lead, on this. Ray's going to be revealing whatever information he can at whatever it is at the right time. Just kind of follow his lead and just help support the idea of like allowing him to be heard and the whole idea of accountability. I just
let the process play out.
Let the process play out. Like we're just kind of giving you our opinions, like based on what we think is going on at this point. But I mean, we're still a long ways away from all of this really coming to a close. So we're just kind of giving you our thoughts at this point.
Can we get him to be in the Peacock reboot of Fresh Prince that just got just today? Peacock got the rights to it. It's a 2-season order. The Fresh Prince reboot is happening. Can we get Ray Fisher in that? Have him play? I don't know.
Ray Fisher.
Will
Smith played Will Smith. I'm just saying.
Hey, Brendan's not wrong.
By the way, you bring up the Fresh Prince thing. I was going to bring this up. I talked this very early on in our show, like when I had my conversation with Will Smith when I was out in LA.
Yes.
So I was on. So for those of you who don't know, I was out there doing some testing in my old job, and it was raining that day, so they shut down all of our testing. And so I ended up getting and I was out there by myself, and I ended up getting a ticket to the Tonight Show. And in the Tonight Show, they just had the normal guests, and they said, hey, if you guys want to stick around after the show.
Was that the episode where Jay Leno was suing him for $10 million?
Yes, it was that one. So I was there. So they said, we're going to be filming this segment for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air if you guys want to stick around. I was right up. I was like the second or third row back, right on an aisle.
Pull up HBO Max right now and find Tim's arm. Where is it?
So you saw my tweet. So
I did see your tweet. Yes.
I have never seen a show. And so they had taken a bunch of like audience shots and all that. And I had never seen it. So I had no idea whether I ever made it into the episode. And
how do you not look?
Because I didn't have Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Oh my God, old man, get a VCR and record it.
Whatever. So finally, I found the episode, and I watched the part where they were filming the little audience shots. You could see like my arm or leg, I can't remember, but you could see me in there because I'm right on the aisle. I'm in the far left part of the screen, like 2 or 3 rows up. So they just cropped me out, but you could see like my leg or my arm. I can't remember what it was. But
everybody, those episodes are uncut on HBO Max. I know because I binged through all of them when the service launched back in late May. They're all uncut on HBO Max. Go find Tim's appendage.
Yeah, it finally answers that question. I mean, this was literally what year that would have been like
90s,
25 years ago.
Yeah, like 93, 94, somewhere.
Okay,
somewhere.
So
it was
26. Yeah,
it was like around
7 years ago. So finally, after all this time, I finally got the question answered that I did not, in fact, make it in the audience shot, but you could see part of my body.
Brent, there was another question before.
There is. It's a little bit more serious than that one, but Clay brought up, can we separate Johns as a creator from a WB employee? I think this is the whole separate the art from the artist question. Where are you guys at?
I mean, I would love it if that's what they were able to do, but I mean, he still needs to come to terms with whatever issues Ray has. Like that has to be dealt with.
Well, but
if they deal with it privately and can.
No, but he's talking about you personally.
Yeah, how about you personally?
I've always separated him as a creator from what I thought was a disastrous tenure on the film side of things. So I would still personally, and I know this is probably not going to make a lot of people happy, but I would still be perfectly fine if he stayed on a creative side and all the whatever alleged bad behavior that he's had is a thing of the past, and he makes amends for whatever whatever issues, like say Ray or whoever else might have with him. So yeah, I would be fine with it.
Chris, what do you think?
Keep him out of films.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that right before I started. Yeah, I agree with everything Tim just said. I mean, It's kind of hard, but I think with time, it's hard for me at least sometimes. And it's, again, depending on what comes to light. If like, I might not be able to help it not separating. Right. If his name is really scarred, if I don't enjoy his work because of it, because that's all I can think about, that's one thing. But I mean, again, like I just said, I did enjoy Three Jokers, just reading it as a story, and the art. The other people that worked on the book, they deserve to have their work supported still, and that's how I look at that. But again, we'll see what comes to light before I really know how I feel about that.
That's the big if. If much worse stuff comes out than what we think we may know about at this point, then my answer would be totally different.
Yeah. So. Scott, your I mean, I know what you said off air before, but your thoughts essentially on that.
I will say this. I can foresee that I'm gonna finish the Three Jokers because I've been waiting too dang long to see how that thread gets tied up. But I can also imagine that being the last Jeff Johns book that I buy new for a while. I'm not getting rid of my back catalog. That just ain't happening.
Right.
It back to my point. The man's been writing books since '99. I can't do to be informed on the DC universe as it currently stands. Brett and I talked about, you would have to have a Crisis on Infinite Earths level event to wipe out the character work and mythology that has been contributed. And I don't think some people understand how deeply entrenched his narrative influence is in the universe.
Yeah. If you did not come out of the comic side, you wouldn't understand all this like we do.
So yeah, I right now, just for sheer survival, have to separate. But that can influence new projects going forward based on how this all shakes out. Yeah, but I'm not inclined right now going forward.
I'm glad this came up in this because I do feel like that is a bit, especially when you talk about people, their reaction to this on social media and the people that defend Johns vehemently. Why would they defend someone that potentially did this, potentially did that? And I think a big part of that is because they still want to be able to read his books. They still want to be able to talk about his work. Cancel culture would potentially eliminate that if he is officially canceled. And I feel like there's a lot of fear for a lot of people that they don't want that to be the case. They don't want to get rid of, like you said, all the roots that he's built, whatever it is, whether it's Flashpoint, whether it's the Aquaman run that you guys sent me a couple years ago,
Green Lantern,
right? Like all Stargirl, all of that. Like I get where people don't want to give that up or get rid of it. And I would say that I think similar to just what you guys have said, separating the art from the artist. I mean, quite honestly, over the last 3 or 4 years, as a result of Me Too, it's something I've had to get used to doing with in terms of movies, with respect to who is in this. I can't. For me personally, it's difficult to me to think about watching like Baby Driver again, or American Beauty, or any of those films.
Superman Returns.
Yeah, I mean, right. Or you know what? If you bring the comic book films to do it, I can understand why maybe a third of the X-Men catalog people can't watch anymore. And that's kind of my big thing is I don't begrudge anybody that says, hey, I can't watch his stuff. I can't watch this, or I can't read this anymore. I totally get that. But I think that is a personal choice. And I think just because you still decide to read the books or watch the movies, it does not mean that you support the artist, what the person did off camera or off set or whatever. There's still room to appreciate the work that they did and still think that they are a horrible person, or allegedly a horrible person, depending on what comes out further with this John situation.
Yeah.
This is something that I've questioned and thought about a lot lately. Ultimately, I guess really I have to say I do come down on the side of separate art from the artist. I mean, this Whedon stuff that's come out is not going to stop me from watching the Avengers. It's not going to stop me from, you know,
Firefly.
Well, I never saw that, but it's not going to stop me from enjoying Buffy the Vampire Slayer or getting a kick out of a Buffy the Vampire Slayer cameo in a recent movie that I watched. And I'll leave it at that because of spoiler reasons, I guess. But
I'm with you. I got you.
It's like that kind of stuff. But then I think about everything that Johns is involved in at DC, and there is so many books that I loved that he was a part of. And I'm like, I'm sorry, maybe this is selfish of me, but I'm not going to not enjoy those works just because it turned out he's actually a bit of a jerk to keep it clean in the real world. Do I struggle with the thought that now the creative team, writer and penciler behind what is probably the greatest Green Lantern series and story of all time, both turn out to just be total, again, jerks, to keep my language clean, even though it's not really the language I want to use? Yeah, I do. And just to be clear, I'm talking about Green Lantern Rebirth and then the Sinestro Corps War between him and Van Sciver. I do struggle with that a little bit. But again, I'm like, if someone just came up to me and said, I've never read Green Lantern, what is the greatest Green Lantern book of all time? I'm going to have to probably hand them a Jeff Johns, Ethan Van Sciver book. And the question of what I think is the greatest work of art is different from who is the greatest artist as a person. And I think we can all agree that as a person, he's not a good person. Maybe he used to be, maybe something changed somewhere, but he's not right now. And it is hard. It is hard to think of that stuff. And then I go back and I'm like, well, I loved Stargirl in DC Universe. By far, I think it's the best they've put out. I absolutely loved it from start to finish. Jeff Johns is all over that. That could not be more. There is no book more tied to Jeff Johns than the book he created, the character he created after the death of his sister. And so it's like, no, I guess I will apologize, but I'm going to say sorry. I am still going to watch and read his work, but at the same time, as entrenched in the past of DC Universe as he is, I do think it's the past. Forgive me, I saw someone in the comments say, is he untouchable because of his history at DC? I don't think he is, just because I don't think he's going to have that. He's not going to have, he did Infinite Crisis, right? Which was like the sequel to Crisis on, like the official sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths. He's the guy who did it. He did Doomsday Clock, which we know where it ended, but when it started, it was the sequel to Watchmen. He's the guy they're tapping to do sequels to some of the biggest stories in all of comics medium. But he's not anymore. Mm-hmm. What's the next thing he's working on? It's Three Jokers. Does anyone, Chris, you probably know better than anybody here. What's he got coming down the pipe after Three Jokers? Is there anything?
There were things that were announced with Three Jokers that have pretty much never been mentioned again. And he just released his last issue of Shazam. And
so to me, it seems like I don't know who that person is for DC right now. But I will tell you, when I hear names at DC related to big events, one, they're not the main continuity books, and two, it's Tom Taylor. He's the name I'm hearing more and more from anyone. Between Deceased, which I finished the first volume of last night, and oh my gosh, that's amazing. But between Deceased and Injustice, it's like, no, they're not the main continuity books, but he has made himself a name for himself. I'm like, I don't think DC has a bigger name right now today. I'm not saying all the time, but today than Tom Taylor. I don't think it's Jeff Johns anymore. So I do think he's on the way back. So yeah, I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch his work. And you know what? If we could somehow be the ones to make this rule, let's keep him out of the movies. His history in the movies just isn't there. But his history on television is pretty good. It's pretty good. If we look at it as separate the art from the artist, the work he has done on television, going back to at least Smallville, the episodes he was a part of on Smallville, stuff he's done with Flash and the Arrow, and basically the entire Arrowverse, or the CW verse as they are trying to rebrand it, whatever, and Stargirl. I mean, in TV, he seems to be good. And I feel like it's worth noting, I never hear any of these stories about Jeff Johns related to TV. I'm not saying it never happens. I'm just saying I haven't heard the stories. Whatever the problem is, I'm not excusing it if it's isolated to one time, because if you commit a crime or you do something horrible one time, you still did it. I'm just saying maybe we just keep him in his wheelhouse. Films are, for whatever reason, he's a failure at. He just failed. And I know he's part of Wonder Woman 84. And I saw someone mention, oh, should we boycott, or should people are saying to boycott Wonder Woman 84? No, that's a terrible idea. That's just hurting the wrong
hurts
people.
Everyone else.
That hurts Gull. It hurts Patty Jenkins. It hurts all the innocent.
Right.
But movie boycotts, you can't. It's a terrible idea. No.
It's just ultimately, I do still struggle with it. Ultimately, I do have to fall on the side of separating the art from the artist. I have to. I don't see an alternative for me.
I'm glad you brought up the boycott thing, because I was gonna like bring up that question next, because I've seen a lot of that. That sentiment always comes up when it comes to canceling somebody as a result of all this. And when you boycott something as a result of one creative's decision, there are a lot of other innocent creatives that you hurt.
Yes.
That you don't, you can't have them be in your crosshairs like that. That's just not how you do it.
Jay in the chat just brought up Scott Snyder possibly as an alternative to my idea of who is the big name right now. And I think that's a great point. Yeah. And I think the reason I didn't think about him is my own biases of I've read a fair amount of Snyder's work, but not a lot of what he's currently got going on. So I just don't, his name just doesn't pop up for me as much.
He's kind of he's moving into his creative after Death Metal. He's kind of like,
is he leaving?
He is saying that he is sort of like, I'm kind of taking a break from superhero stuff. I want to go work on my creator-owned stuff. He's got a Kickstarter going on right now.
Who's Scott Snyder? What is he? What is he?
Go read a comic.
Go read a comic that I sent you months ago.
Do we have the blow up sound effect here?
We should.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap this up. I know we could go on, literally could go on for hours here. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. Let us know what you guys thought of this discussion. It was kind of like an impromptu, let's go ahead and try this thing. We want to be able to do this like periodically. This is not a weekly show by any means at this point. We just want to be able to kind of do this, periodically. Let us know what you thought. Give us some feedback. We'd love to hear it.
Thank you for listening and watching for the last 2 hours.
Thank you for all of you.
Because I see so many names now in the chat that I saw at the start of this. Thank you. We really appreciate you sticking it out with us.
Yeah. Yes, that is awesome.
Share.
So awesome.
Please spread this around if you think it's worth it. We'd love for people to come subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, we're starting to do more stuff with it. So yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
We'll see. Let us know if you want some more live. We'll consider it. So
hey, Jay, I don't think we have plans to release this on a podcast anywhere, but the video will be up. You can go back and rewatch it.
Yes,
absolutely.
And if you don't want to see us, you can just close your eyes. It'll make it all better.
Do what I do and download the audio anyway, and just listen to it on your own podcast.
There you go.
All right, guys, go get some sleep.
All right.
Okay,
all right,
guys.
Good night, guys.
Take it easy.
Yeah. Okay. Ended the stream, I think. Nope, I didn't. No, I didn't.